Welcome to part 2 of my conversation with Justice Malala, South African political commentator and author, a newspaper columnist, a television host, and producer. Enjoy part 2 of our conversation. In your book, Justice, you highlight a number of positives, and I want to get a sense from you whether you still think those are the pillars for sustaining democracy going ahead. You cited the Constitution, wealth of talent. You cited the history of activism. Does that give you comfort and hope going forward that South Africa's democracy is still in a good place?
Yes. Some of those. So the one key thing is realizing that the Constitution is a piece of paper. It's the people who have to stand up for it, live it, implement it. And we've had the institution of the Constitutional Court challenged. So I've spoken about the July riots.
Yeah.
What happened there is that the former president of South Africa behaved in a contemptuous manner to the Zondo Commission into state capture. Yeah. Then there is no other court for this to go to, but to the Constitutional Court, which came out and said, you're being contemptuous. This is an organ formed of our Constitution.
Right.
But we saw it being attacked and being denigrated in public by the former president and his supporters, and essentially saying, we disown this constitution. It's a constitution of the whites. It's a constitution that was not made for us Africans in many ways. And it's, hello, the rights of, why is it that a ordinary citizen has these rights in Amsterdam, and I can have them in Popoma, in Bulawayo, or can have them in Shawelo, in Soweto. So it's absolutely, the Constitution is a strong, powerful document, but it's contested all the time. And I think in South Africa, we have to contest. We have to fight and protect it all the time. Otherwise, it becomes sullied. And in many ways, part of the sullying of that, and in many ways, perhaps in your country, you've had this experience where even the choice of who sits on the Constitutional Court gets skewed so that suddenly the judgments, the interpretation of what exactly is in that Constitution is sullied. It's no longer, you say, but that wasn't the intent or the explicit meaning of what the Constitution stood for. So if there's anything I've learned, it's that the Constitution has to be defended, has to be tested, yes, but also defended and renewed by precedent, by making it sharper through case law and so forth, so that it continues to protect us. Talent, I think South Africa needs to be careful that I now spend some of my time in the US as well. And one of the things that fascinates me and saddens me is you go to a state like Texas, and many people have many views on Texas. But Texas, the health system is made up hugely of, and you know this, you and I have spoken during that time. I worked for a Nigerian newspaper group.
Yeah.
And for me, to see so many talented world-class Nigerian healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, oncologists, gynecologists, are the best in the world.
Absolutely.
Who should be doing amazing work in Nigeria or elsewhere on this continent. They're in Texas. Let me tell you a story that made me pain.
Sure, absolutely.
And it's a story I read about a nursing association in the United States. This is about 2.5, 3 years ago. At that nursing association was a Nigerian nurses working in the United States. And they had held their annual general meeting. And the biggest issue they were discussing was gender-based violence by men against their wives who were members of these nurses, of this nursing association. But there had been 10, I believe, if I remember correctly, 10 murders of these workers by their spouses. And I sat there thinking, how is it that we Africans are on this continent and we have this problem? We should be at home giving to our people, building our countries. And so to your question about talent, is that if you're in South Africa and you speak about talent and you don't say, let's preserve it, let's keep it here, then we are going to end up with South Africans, as they do already, working in Dubai, working in London, working and doing amazing work. It's great to have South Africans doing amazing things in the world, but it shouldn't be that they felt they couldn't do it here. Absolutely. And that is South Africa's challenge, that the engineers and the doctors, much like, you know, when my mother sent me off to Zimbabwe, it was, you don't know education. The Zimbabweans know what real education is, and they will teach you. And to have that talent leave a country it's heartbreaking. And I fear that South Africa is not giving to its professionals, to its and it's not keeping them, it's not retaining them if we don't do it. I think the last one you spoke about was activism. And I think activism is absolutely key for South Africa. And I think activists have done incredibly well, whether it's on education, whether it's highlighting, you know, that kids don't have toilets in their schools, to state capture, to the media exposing, as you well know, you know, nefarious activities from the very, very top. So I think that's still a strong point in this country. It continues to be a strong point. And I hope that we sustain it, that it's not, you know, people don't give up. There has been a trend of NGOs starting up merely to push a particular political line. They don't generally last, but it's a trend that concerns me. But we have a fantastic civil society here, and I think that is hugely admirable. We haven't seen activists, as you well know, other parts of the world, parts of the media world, whether it's the Philippines and you know, your case, people being arrested, people being detained, you know, all of these shenanigans. We haven't had that, and for that I'm hugely grateful, and I hope it never happens. But you know, if you'd asked me, I would have said it would never happen in very many places that I've lived in. And it's happened.
So in marking your book, Justice, I would say I'll give you 9 out of 10. And I'll say that the country is still on its descent. We haven't reached rock bottom. What's your pushback on that?
I wish I could push back.
Right.
I wish I could push. I think instead of a steep decline, we're cruising. Yeah. We're cruising, but on the descent. And I think, if anything, you asked about the elections. Yeah. If anything, the warning lights keep on going, and this election, and not just the result, but also the apathy, is a warning light that, guys, it's really going down. You've got to do something to get this thing up. Yeah. Yeah. And I hope our leadership is listening. I really hope that our leadership is listening, because I don't think it will take so much to turn things around, to bring back the confidence and the hope and the optimism. And that's the first thing you need. You need South Africans like me to be saying, it's happening here. Trevor, come and invest, because I'm telling you, this is lined up, this is lined up. But if you were to ask me today about that, I would say, I'm in awe at you for a long time. Yeah.
Justice, I must say, you're saying that right now breaks my heart, and I'll tell you why. Because I hear that is me about Zimbabwe, Justice, 20 years ago. It won't take much to turn this thing around. We haven't reached the rock bottom, so it breaks my heart to hear you say that. But nonetheless, let's leave that matter there and move on to a very fascinating project, Justice. You are working on you've finished a new book, 9 Days to Midnight, which is coming out in 2022, published by Simon and Schuster, in the USA, Canada, and the UK. I look forward to reading that book. But I was wondering, why 9 Days to Midnight?
Look, the title might change, but that's my title for it.
Okay.
So my editor and my publishers are still reading it and so forth. But 9 Days to Midnight, I'm taking. So my book is a leadership lesson, and I'm trying to say, what do leaders do when crisis hits? And I'm taking one instance, and that instance was the murder, the assassination of Chris Hani in 1993. And I'm looking at it and I'm saying, this is what Nelson Mandela did. This is what the other players in the story did. And there were many, it was a huge orchestra of people. Nelson Mandela was president of the ANC. He was not president of South Africa. F.W. de Klerk was president of white South Africa, but he was not president of South Africa. And Chris Hani was the most popular ANC leader after Nelson Mandela. He was the darling of the young people. When he arrived at the stadium full of people, it was as if a rock star had arrived. The place erupted in just joy. And so he was shot and killed by a white man, Polish-born, who wanted to explicitly said, I'm going to go for Chris Hani so that Black people are so angry, they start attacking whites, and whites are so afraid, they start defending themselves and attacking Blacks, and let this thing blow up. That was he and his co-conspirators, that was their plan. And so he manages to do this. He kills Chris Hani, and within minutes of the news being broken on radio stations, on television, the riots start erupting all over South Africa. People are killed within hours of this. And in 1993, the talks had collapsed. Mandela and de Klerk had sort of restarted them. And it was, well, the project to build a new South Africa is broken now. And so I take the days following Chris Hanne's murder and say, how did South Africa not collapse then? Because the images that you and I were talking about of July this year are the images of April 1993. And in many ways, it was the leadership of Nelson Mandela, the cooperation in many instances of F.W. de Klerk, the extraordinary leadership of other people. Cyril Ramaphosa was Mandela's understudy at the time. Thabo Mbeki was there. So many others stepped up and did extraordinary things. So it's what is possible when a leader says, I have to take responsibility and I have to lead my people. So in that week, Nelson Mandela was called a sellout. He was called all kinds of names when he said, guys, we are at the door of freedom. Let's walk through the door instead of descending into allowing ourselves to be provoked into anarchy. So that's really the.
And if I remember,
it took 9 days for peace to come, for the message to get through.
If I remember, Justice, correct me here. This is the moment when Nelson Mandela stood up at FNB and spoke, and the crowd tried to boo him. And he said, if I'm your leader, I mean, to paraphrase, if I'm your leader, you'll keep quiet. But if I'm not your leader, I'll continue doing what I'm doing. And I think he sat down. What a mark of leadership. Am I right? Am I summing it right there? Correct.
That was, so there were several moments in which he made that point. So first of all, because this thing was aimed at racializing the entire event, Nelson Mandela went on television and said, a white man murdered our hero. A white woman saw him and called the police, and that's how we got him. So that was the one speech. Then there was the speech you speak about. There was another one when he was booed and heckled right in the middle of the 9 days, when he was booed and heckled and people left the stadium and it was just terrible. This was in Soweto. So there were moments like those where he stood his ground despite the absolute pushback. When people were saying, Chris is dead and you tell us about peace. So, I mean, if you think about your journalistic and your corporate career, your entrepreneurial career, how many times have you been in that situation of absolute stress when staff members are saying, you've lost the plot? And now he had a nation saying, you've lost the plot. And, what's the point of this? Let's have war on both sides. And he had to bring white South Africa in. He had to bring black South Africa in, and kind of build a vision for the future. So that's really the book.
As Nyaradzo, we strive to continuously bring convenience to our clients. Nyaradzo Group is proud to introduce Sawi, a new virtual chatbot assistant on WhatsApp. With Sawi, you are now able to interact with us from the comfort of your home and can be assisted anytime via WhatsApp. With life assurance products, diaspora products, applying and assessing your policy, payment platforms, claims information, and any other queries concerning payments, policy information, or products and services. Simply WhatsApp Sawi on +263 712 992892 or register and start interacting and receiving notifications from Sawi on WhatsApp. Now, join in and experience a new level of convenience 24 hours a day with Sawi.
Justice, let's move on now to you've been general manager of the Times Media Group, also GM of the Sowetan and the Sunday World, getting some experience in running newspapers. But for me, as far as I'm concerned, the height of your career as a journalist is you as editor of This Day, which for me was, still remains as perhaps one of South Africa's finest newspapers, short-lived in a way. But I look forward to This Day. It is beautiful journalism. It is quality journalism. Talk to me about the lessons that running This Day and the pain of seeing it collapse. What lessons did you learn from that? What lessons did you take away from that experience of this promise of this beautiful newspaper, which then goes to collapse? And why did it collapse?
Trevor, thank you. Thanks for that question. So first of all, you are proprietor of the newspaper that I, grew up reading as a teenager and as a young person. So there were two things, and you wouldn't know this, but you were very instructive in doing it. You appointed, when you came to South Africa and the Mail and Guardian, you appointed young people to run your publications, and it was a lesson for South Africa, where a huge chunk of the publications here, magazines and newspapers, were run by the seasoned older people. So when Nduka Bernard decided to launch a new newspaper in South Africa, he approached me, and I was 32. I'd never edited a newspaper before. I was a correspondent. I was living in New York at the time. But it was such a thrilling idea. And I had gone around trying to sell the idea of starting a newspaper. And it was, yes, I'm here. I'd only been living in New York for years. So I grabbed the opportunity with both hands, and I got on a plane and came home. What were the lessons? The lessons are that, first of all, it's a hard business. It's a hard business to run a newspaper at the time of so much flux, of movement from print to online, and to break into a very established market like the South African daily and, as you know, the weekly market. It takes time, it takes money, it takes guts, and we didn't have a lot of those. And within a short period of time, and to be fair, we made huge, fantastic mistakes. We didn't read some of the business environment properly. I'm the first to say we didn't have enough of a war chest, projections about, we were naive and in many ways also arrogant. We thought having a beautiful product, strong journalism, breaking some stories was all that was needed. It wasn't. South Africa is in many ways, it's the advertising industry and the buying industry was very much racialized. It was very white. A lot of people didn't understand what we were doing or what we were trying to achieve with the publication. So there were many challenges. Do I regret it? Not a day. I loved every minute of conceptualizing, putting it together. There were some fantastic people I got to work with. A lot of my heroes who I'd always admired came and worked with us, and I loved it. But for me, at the personal level, it taught me a bit about leadership, about humility, about knowing that, Trevor is right about this, and I'm not, or that it's not my way or the highway, that it can be your way and my way and a bit of everyone else. I learned a lot. It was the best education. I've been blessed, I've just been blessed with a great education. I've learned from people like, what you did in this country with your publication. And Duka was a
Maverick, good friend of mine.
He's a good friend of mine. And I loved working with him. It also opened up, my experience of this continent was really Southern Africa. And I think many of us are like that. It opened up West Africa for me. And I still do. I still have contacts there. I still go to Nigeria and other parts. I was working with a few other people in a project on Liberia and so forth, and the formation of it's a historical kind of TV series. So in many ways, it opened a whole new world and a beautiful world, an optimistic world, a world of possibility for me. And with everything you and I have both said about Zimbabwe, South Africa, and the challenges, there are many, many challenges on the continent, but I find the attitude to the challenges in Nigeria and in West Africa in particular, refreshing in that tomorrow is the beginning of a fantastic, great new day. And people continue to give me so much optimism and hope and love. It's part of what breaks my heart, just quickly on what you spoke about before, is when I go to Nigeria, there are many, many issues, and there are many issues in West Africa. But I'm like, our son has returned. You can drop me there tonight, and I will call someone, and I will be happy, and they will open their doors and their arms to me, and I'm forever grateful to really be. I wish my compatriots would realize what it means to be an African and know love of untold magnitude from the way I was welcomed in Zimbabwe to Kenya and Nigeria really became a second home to me, with all the negatives that happened with starting this day in South Africa, and the fact that it didn't work out. But I have a family there. I have friends. I have lifelong.
There's beauty in Africans. I mean, the way they welcome you, open their doors, and your friend becomes my friend. And we're just amazing people. Amazing people. Tell me, Justice, you've done a bit of television, like we said. Hard copy 1 and 2 were phenomenal. Is there television? Is Hollywood beckoning somewhere there? Talk to me about that.
Now, I think in a way, people like me say, journalism and the written word is the thing. But it starts with that, and then it becomes all kinds of other things. I mean, I'm so pleased by, I was kept an eye on you as you tweeted that you've started these conversations. And it's amazing how we go from the one thing to the next, and actually it's one river, it's one thing. So I've done a few television projects. I've been involved with a few which hopefully will work out in the next few years. So television is, I've never believed I'm a front of camera person, but I think that there is so much to do with this medium, with what you've built, and I think this is the future. Actually, I think that what was that famous quote when I think the head of one of the Hollywood studios in the 1940s, and he was told, oh, you know, television is going to eat up movies. And he said, that thing will be, who wants to sit at home watching a Gogglebox?
Yes.
And within 10 years, I think 50 million TV sets in American households. Many people who say, I'm going to sit down and watch Trevor on television. Actually, you know, certainly my kids don't watch television. They're watching stuff on their laptops, on their phones. It's all moving so fast. So we all find ourselves in that river. It's just evolution, and that, you know, we don't get left behind.
Let's talk about that river. You were born in Hammarskraal, am I right?
I grew up in Hammarskraal.
Where were you born? Where were you born? Let me rephrase the question. Where were you born?
I was born in Johannesburg, but my father in 1976, when the Soweto riots happened. So I was born at Baragwanath Hospital.
Right.
The 76 riots happened, and my father said, my kids, you know, it's just mayhem in Soweto, and took us to his sister in Hammarskraal, which is a small town north of Pretoria.
Right.
And that's where I spent my entire life, young life, because it was rural. There were no protests about freedom or anything like that. I only kind of became conscious of all that when I was a teenager. It was a small village, no water, no electricity, no schools. So my mother and other women put money together and built the first school there.
Wow.
And the government provided teachers, and that's how the first school was built. And my sister and my brother, my two sisters and my brother, we all went there. And yeah, that's, you know, I mean, the high schools were only built when Nelson Mandela became president, but before then they were in high school. So
from this village, you know, where you grew up, Hammarskraal, you find yourself as the Sunday Times correspondent in London, the Sunday Times correspondent in New York. I mean, from very humble beginnings, something must have happened in Hammarskraal in terms of either the water you drank or something. Talk to me about the values and the principles that made Justice who he is.
Trevor, I think the key one is teachers and education. I think a teacher can transform all of us. And I know you've asked me to give you 3 books that I love, and we can talk about that.
Yes, we'll talk about that later.
I was lucky. I was extremely lucky to have a teacher when I was about 11, 12, who would say to all of us kids, and you know, there were 120 of us in one classroom, and it'd say, if I ever see you, and he lived in the village, if I ever see you walk past a piece of paper without picking it up and reading it, whether we are at school or in the village, you're going to get a hiding from me. So, so you know, you had these kids walking around the village, and it's like, oh, there's a piece of paper, and picking it up, and you're reading it. And this is a guy, you know, who... Do
you remember his name, Justice? Do you remember his name, the teacher's name?
Yeah, his name was Joe Modise.
Aha, Joe Modise, the Joe Modise?
No, not Joe Modise, the minister
okay. Okay.
No.
Okay.
He was
a different Modise. Right.
But Joe Modise was an amazing guy, you know. So he loved reading, he loved books. And so he wanted, but he'd run out of, it was a small village. There aren't many books in the village. And so he wanted to read. He'd run out of his own and he needed more. So he'd say, everyone, make sure you bring a book to school tomorrow from your parents', you know, little collection. If not, go to your neighbor and get a book, any book. and we'd all get the books, and he'd pick the ones he wanted to read and read them. And then he'd say, you know, Justice, give yours to the guy next to you, go off and read it and come back and tell me the story. So you had to read the book.
Wow.
But this guy managed to get all of us just reading, you know. Wow. We read, he'd get us reading picture books, he'd buy picture books and get us to read them. We read everything from Mills and Boone to just the most arbitrary thing, but he just wanted you to read. And I got the bug, you know, a few of us got the bug, and we just kept on reading and we didn't stop.
Wow.
And it wasn't amazing literature. It was pot boilers, spy thrillers, detective books, anything that was available. But he got us reading. And I think that was a turning point for me, certainly, because I just kept on doing it. And, you know, South African schooling, you know, by the time I was 16, the riots and so forth had spread all over South Africa. So you know, I remember there was 1986, there was pretty much no schooling in South Africa. And I spent that year doing what that teacher used to do, you know, ganging up with my friends and saying, oh, you know, what does your neighbor have? Getting the books and reading and exchanging them and so forth. So wow. that's really, so for me, one of the things about Zimbabwe that I was astonished and loved was that when I got there, I thought, oh, I come from my school and I'm a bit smart, so I know what I'm doing. And these incredible, amazing kids who had far better education than I had. And I've always said, you know, if you want to change the Nelson Mandelas of this world and so forth, you know, the Eastern Cape of South Africa had amazing schools, incredible teachers. And I think Zimbabwe had the same. And if we are to make something of our children ourselves, it's to revive or make schools that give us that quality of education, that quality of teacher. And I think it transforms anything and anyone, really.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. Sadly, our education system has broken down, which leads me to, you called things right about Zimbabwe when some of us were still taken by the coup, when we thought Emerson Mnangagwa would change his colors. But you warned that this was essentially the military taking over and that this thing would not end well. As you sit there, Justice, as a South African who reached the continent so well, what are your concerns about Zimbabwe and where we are right now?
I think
you were not expecting that one, eh?
I'm an optimist on Zimbabwe because I love it so much, and I really do believe that a Zimbabwe that attracts its talent back would soar, would make South Africa and so many other parts of this continent look puny, look like a joke. Because I'm a big fan of Zimbabwean talent. And I think with the right work, maybe the institutions can be largely brought back. I say to my South African friends, I've never met a Zimbabwean who's disappointed me. They all do incredibly well. Maybe I haven't been meeting the right people.
Yeah, I think so. You better come to Harare. There's many of us like that. You'll be disappointed, depressed, actually.
But where is it now? You know, I think the resilience is still there. I think there's so much good that is still there. But I do think, I don't know where to start. I do think that it needs, in a way, from the outside, you think it needs a reboot. But what do I say to someone and say, oh, you guys need to reboot, and they're in jail the next day? And the institutions, whether it's the courts, whether, that need to stand up for that, have been totally hollowed out. A friend of mine who's Zimbabwean is an advocate here in Johannesburg, and I always feel a lurch of sadness that such talent, and there was so much juristic talent in Zimbabwe in the 1990s, that it's now arguing matters in a South African court. It breaks my heart. So I don't know whether it's a moment or whether it's many people have said maybe South Africa needs to hit the rock bottom that you were referencing earlier. But if that is the cure or the wake up moment for South Africa, then what do I say about Zim, where I think rock bottom was hit again and again and a bounce and again? I'm not sure. Some of the institutions, even the lack of vision and nous on the part of the opposition in many cases has been hugely disappointing. But perhaps I can be a little bit controversial and say my 2 cents worth is that South Africa and your country in many ways need the same thing. And it is to start loving, is to start realizing that we can't continually be making this about the liberation struggle. It's about what is happening to our people right now. And so I get into conversations here, and it's, all we talk about is our glorious history, and, South Africa and the glorious ANC, and ZANU-PF and ZAPU and the glorious history. Kids need education right now, we can't be excusing 30 years of our own failure.
40 years in Zimbabwe. 40 years in Zimbabwe.
Exactly. So we need to cut the cord, and I think that will free us to begin to say, Emmerson Mnangagwa, you're not my comrade. We are fellow citizens. It's time now for you to step aside for young blood, for energetic blood, for people with vision and strategy and nous to come in and get this country going. And that is exactly the message that you should be saying to me as well about South Africa, because if there's anything in our conversation that's made my blood, that made me cold, is when you said, what I just said about South Africa is what you were saying about Zimbabwe. And I take that very seriously, because many people here would say, no, not here. But I know far better people than myself and my country, and it's happened there. And that is, it gives me the shivers.
Yeah, but right there, Justice, I think it would be difficult for anybody to disagree with what you've said. It's high time that right time that Emmerson Mnangagwa looks himself in the mirror and says, what have I done to get us where we are? We can't be talking about Ian Smith 40 years. Yes, indeed, there's stuff Ian Smith that he did that is left over from that. But really, 40 years, there's something that we've done to ourselves and to each other, and we need to own up to that. But much more importantly, after owning up, what road do we have to fix? What we never got to do, and what role do we have to play in terms of building something new? And similarly, you know, Cyril Ramaphosa ought to be looking himself in the mirror and not blame apartheid. Yes, apartheid did something. Yes, we've got the scars from apartheid, but for goodness sake, let's draw the line in the sand and take ownership. On that point, Justice, you know, our global viewers love books, Justice. So I'm going to turn us to something that you love doing. You love writing books. I love reading books, and our audience throughout the world absolutely love books, and they look forward to this part of the show. What books have you read? 3 books, Justice, that have left a huge impact on you, and why?
So I'm going to start. So I hadn't heard about. I'd read a few books of Zimbabwean literature, but in South Africa, sadly, you probably will read at university, you might come across Tsitsi Dangaremba as a set work, but I didn't have any Zimbabwean literature. So I was so blessed and so lucky to read as a young man Dambudzo Marechera and House of Hunger. So that's my first book, and it's a book. Stylistically, I'd been very formal in the books I read. So they were all very, and to read someone who just absolutely tore everything apart, just tore his brain was at 500 decibels. It was a mind whack, a mind blast to read. Not just that. I mean, I remember just reading that and then going out and just getting everything I could of his to read. So I loved having my mind and my brain opened up by Dambudzo's books, but primarily House of Hunger, which I thought was, and I've read the stories about how he was robbed of the Booker Prize, and I think it's a loss for the world, really, that he didn't win it, with all his personal issues and all that. But I think as a book and as a piece of work, it was revolutionary for its time, and bloody good writing.
Absolutely.
I'll
share a story with you, which I haven't shared to a lot of people. When I was at university doing first year, went drinking at the students' club, and I think I was one of the few people to stagger out of the club. And who staggers with me? Dambudzo Marechera, me and my friend, into our room. Two of us were sharing. Me and a friend was doing law. And Dambudzo Marechera says, guys, I have nowhere to go. I'm going to spend the night here. So Dambudzo Marechera, me and Dambudzo spend the night. Me in my bed, my friend in my bed, and Dambudzo on the floor. He was that kind of a human being.
That is amazing. That's a great story.
Yeah. Your second book, wow. Justice?
My second book is a book that I would love everyone who's listening to this, watching, to try and get. So you and I have spoken about corruption and so forth. There's a beautiful book. So a lot of people have read Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. But the second book in that series is called No Longer at Ease.
Yeah.
And it's about, it's post-colonial Nigeria, 1950s, and there's a young person full of hope, and it comes from this small village, Okonko's village, Okonko from the book. And the people of the village put money together. He gets accepted into Oxford University, goes off and reads classics or something like that. And the book starts as he's coming back home on a boat on a ship from England, and arrives back home. and he gets a job in the civil service. And it's the story of this young man full of ideals. And you read about him, you read about post-apartheid South Africa.
Zimbabwe.
And all of us with these dreams and hopes and optimism. And he takes a bribe. And it's a devastating book. It's a beautifully, simply written book. It's thin but it goes to the heart of everything that we've discussed today and how we perhaps get out of there. But I see myself, I see my contemporaries, I see our continent in it. It's a beautiful book, and I love it.
I agree with you. Love the book, love the book. Yeah. The third one, Justice?
The third one is a South African book. If you're interested in apartheid and what it did, you have to get this book. It's a book by a friend of mine. His name is Jacob Dlamini. He's an academic. I think he's at Yale University now.
It's a painful book. It's a painful book. Painful. Oh, man. It's please.
It's a very painful book. It's called Askari. And Askari is the name that was given to ANC cadres, soldiers who were captured by the apartheid state, tortured, and basically turned into hunters of freedom fighters. And it focuses on one particular notorious, well-known hunter of freedom fighters called Glory Sidibe, whose story, I mean, you're so right, Trevor, it's a painful book. It's a painful book, because this is a young man whose brother is arrested during a protest in the 70s. He himself goes to university, gets into the anti-apartheid movement, into the liberation movement, goes off and trains as an ANC soldier. The ANC loves him, is full of potential. He is bright as a button. He's brave, and he comes back home and plants a few bombs. And in time, he is tracked down, arrested. In fact, he is tracked down to Swaziland and the apartheid government, and its most notorious killer, I think, Eugene de Kock.
I think it's Eugene de Kock.
It's Eugene de Kock, and brings him back to South Africa and tortures him for months, non-stop, on a farm, Flak Plus. It's a terrible book. It's a terrible book, but it's also a beautifully written book, a sensitive book, but a book that shows you the complexity of our lives. That our heroes were also. It's a book that's devastating. But
absolutely.
I read it and it shook me and scared me and.
I was impressed by, I mean, so many things in that book, Justice. Thank you for sharing it. But one other thing that, rather in addition to that, one other thing that really impressed me was the research, the thorough research, the recourse to primary sources and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's mind-blowing. When I say it's a painful book, I'm not saying people shouldn't read. It's a must-read book if you want to understand the liberation struggle in South Africa, the ANC and the so-called sellouts, the necklacing and so forth. Absolutely beautiful book. Justice, it's been a pleasure. I suspected you and I would spend more than an hour, and we have. And I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, Justice. Thank you so much for setting aside the time. You know, to me, Justice, why I've come to you is you embody that African who has so much promise for the continent. And your independence and outspokenness in South Africa, I know you've taken quite a little of flack, but you've stood on principle, and there's no time that South Africa needs that more than where we are right now, and more than where South Africa is going to be going. Your voice, your courage, your love for democracy, and for love for truth and what is important for South Africa, not for the ANC or DA or EFF, for me, is what I love in you, is what attracts me to the person that you are. So thank you so much for creating this time. Allow me, Justice, to turn to our viewers. You remain where you're sitting. Turn to our viewers who are all over the world to say thank you so much for watching In Conversation with Trevor. To remind you that we are a weekly show. We are out every Monday on YouTube at 7 a.m. Central African time. And to ensure that you don't miss out on any of these quality conversation, like the quality conversation I've just had now with Justice. And by the way, this is going to be a two-part series because Justice and I have gone on. Remember to press this subscribe button and you get an alert and you're able to watch. We've gone a step further, by the way. We've created a podcast for you. So if you scroll down below this video, you'll find a link to our postcard for you to listen to. So for your listening pleasure, do click to that link. So until next time, cheers to you all. Bye now.